Okay, so, let us begin. Chapter 4. The inn was surprisingly warm and cozier than Hassan expected, considering the unabated assault of chill winds on the coastal town. The lighting, too, was something unfamiliar to his experience. It was more likely an oddity for anywhere, not just inns. Peculiarly shaped jars adorned the walls and ceiling at regularly spaced intervals, glowing with a soft luminescence. There was no flame present or visible source he could discern. It was a calm, pleasant light, and it helped to soothe the intense anxiety Hassan felt overwhelmed by. Jellyfish. Jellyfish, Dern commented to Hassan, having noticed where his attention was drawn. What? The lights, he replied. It's from jellyfish. They produce a substance that can glow under certain circumstances. Hassan nodded in feigned understanding, though how someone managed to create jellyfish lights he couldn't imagine. The proprietor of this establishment is a man of many talents and unique hobbies. The lights are far from the only oddity you can find here. Their hostess gave a slight giggle at Dern's comment and looked back with an amused grin. That's quite an understatement, she joked. Dern smiled back and gave a throaty chuckle. He never ceases to amaze, does he? Dern commented, but any possible answer was cut off by Hassan, pushing ahead of the others to confront the young girl. We came for information, not to waste time admiring useless fish lights, the Ka-Ra interjected, towering over their young hostess oppressively. Do you have anything important to offer besides this nonsense? She only faltered for a moment before his overbearing posture, but looked challengingly back into the Ka-Ra's eyes the whole time. It appeared she'd dealt with men of this nature before. Considering she was working in an inn with a taproom, it was certain this kind of male bravado was nothing exceptionally new to her. Hassan was startled and a little ashamed of his father's behavior. It was obvious that Ka-Ra was uncomfortable with the present situation and his lack of control over current events. But Hassan never expected to see such a clear display of insecurity from the man he always looked up to as strong and assured. Even Cho'Gath seemed a little unsettled by his chieftain's behavior, and was examining the furniture in the common room to avert his attention from the scene. Have a seat at the bar. Papa will be with you shortly. The girl said about as courteously as she could manage, considering the circumstances. She glanced at each of their faces in turn, then hurriedly shuffled out of the room into the kitchen. Welcome to the newcomer. Dern broke the unsettling mood of the moment, and coaxed them down the main aisle between the tables, towards the long wooden bar running almost the entire face of one wall. Hassan followed, taking in every detail. Whoever owned this place took great pride in it, and it showed. The tables and chairs were simple but clean and well-oiled. The walls were painted mustard yellow and adorned with an array of maritime tapestries. Despite the familiar furnishings, there were peculiarities as well. A series of metal tubes ran the entire length of the common room across both the top and bottom of the walls. They were painted to blend in with the surrounding decor, but stood out anyway thanks to the noticeable knobs and joint pieces connecting the entire system into one continuous structure. Whether they began or ended there, every branch led back to the brick structure that dominated the common room. A fireplace stood central to the dining area, lending to warm and inviting air to of the place. It was an amazing work of ingenuity that masterfully bypassed the restrictions inherent to buildings on platforms and stilts. The abnormally large hearth was set upon a stone column foundation built from the shore below. It rose through the floor, though where wood plank met stone column appeared seamless. A cavity several feet up provided a place for the fire, safely out of reach of the wood below. There was a blaze roaring hungrily within. A peculiar metal tank was embedded into the stonework above the flames. It was from this oddity all the metal tubes throughout the room connected. The stone column continued upward from there, gradually narrowing as it passed through the hole in the ceiling to provide a chimney. It was exceedingly elaborate. There were even bronze sconces adorning each side of the fireplace's interior. They held a dish full of simmering scented oils several inches above the fire. The aroma was a welcome nicety as it banished the foulness of the outdoors. As they approached the bar and its stools, Hassan could barely contain his curiosity any longer. He reached down along the base of the counter to touch one of the odd metal tubes. He flinched back in surprise immediately. It was hot. Well, not quite scalding, but the metal of the pipe was exceedingly warm and difficult to hold for very long. It bled that heat into the surrounding air, warming the room and creating the comfortable temperature Hassan noted upon entering. The only radiant heat system you will find anywhere, I imagine, Dern offered in response to the unspoken question. It forces hot water through all of these pipes, which in turn heats the entire inn. There's nothing like it anywhere I've traveled. Hassan gave a grunt of disgust as he took a seat at the bar, obviously less than amused by the topic's return to the odd creations of the inn's patron. Cho'Gath sat quietly beside him, not offering any hint as to his own feelings. The two guards stood off to the side and glanced around the tap room nervously. There was no use commenting on his father's ridiculous behavior, and Hassan decided to let it go. He turned to Dern knowingly and sat at the bar. Hassan barely reached his stool when their host made his entrance. A clamor of clanging metal preceded his arrival through the doorway. The source of the noise was a belt of strange tools and instruments around his waist. The odd collection hung from leather loops and clanked against each other with every step. Blasted water pipes, the innkeeper muttered. They're a wonder to behold when you can maintain running water in the kitchens, but they're a nightmare to repair when one springs a leak. Even worse when four do. It was apparent by his clothes and comments he had recently confronted some unruly source of water. It seemed likely by his damp clothes and disheveled appearance he may have been on the losing end of that confrontation. He was old and gray, but not ancient like Dern. This man's years were more the ravages of a hard life, not an exceptionally long one. He bore the weight of his years and struggles well, and Hassan could tell it was this man who spent the endless hours toiling to keep the inn clean. He was portly, but not much. His blue overcoat and trousers appeared well kept despite their current dampened state, although it was clear they'd seen a life of work and heavy wear. There was a jovial air about him and a beam from the expression of his face. In his eyes, Hassan noticed a familiar look of awareness and intelligence. It was the part that attracted Dern, he suspected. The innkeeper was good at logic, too, because he didn't appear surprised in the least to see them. He gave a friendly nod to Dern, then glanced around the rest of them, as if measuring each by what he saw. "Come with me, please." He said it with a smile, then led them through a side room into the hallway. He opened the second door they came to and waved them all in. "Have a seat and rest. You're probably going to need it." He corralled them all into chairs and then turned his focus on Dern. Hassan was in awe of the room. It was large open space with a multitude of seating options scattered throughout, but that wasn't what earned his amazement. He'd never seen so many books in his life. Every wall was a shelf, and every shelf was filled to the brim with neat rows of leather-bound volumes. He had seen books before. Dern always had 3 or 4, and come to think of it, he always wondered how the titles seemed to be replaced with new ones on an oddly regular basis. Perhaps this was the answer. Could this man be his supplier? While Hassan knew how to read, he didn't have much experience with books. Their weight and bulk made them inconvenient for the Concho Gaul's constant life of travel. But the idea of the immense knowledge contained in all these books was astounding. He wondered how long it would take to read them all. The challenge excited him a little. "Getting into trouble as usual, Dern," the man chided, drawing Hassan from his silent reverie. With that comment, Hassan was immediately convinced these two men were more familiar with each other than just acquaintances. "No more than usual, Borwell, but I need your help this time." "Don't you always?" Borwell explained, but quickly drew solemn. "Now don't worry about introductions. I have a pretty good idea of who you all are. Besides, there's no time for that. I'm fairly certain I know your reasons for coming. As soon as I heard Dern was in town with the Concho Gaul, I knew you'd be coming. I just hoped you came here first." "Why is that?" Hassan interrupted, as he stood to face the innkeeper. He seemed insulted he wasn't being recognized as the leader of this band and was doing a terrible job of asserting authority. Borwell turned to the Kavrak questioningly for a moment, then answered, "By now, word of your presence has reached the slave ships. If you stopped anywhere along the way here, then we have even less time before soldiers arrive." Having answered, he returned his attention back to Dern. "Who are they?" Dern asked. "I know about the Venorans, but those villains are merely a tool for a job. Who is their employer? Who is the rising star in the eclipse?" "Notice that, did ya?" Borwell replied. "Was a new one for me until a few months ago. It's a new religious following that rose up in the usual places. I started hearing news from a few of my contacts about their growing influence. They've been spreading rapidly and purging what they deem lesser religions in their path. Nothing new there, of course. There's always one cult or another gaining ground over the others. But then they started showing up here, and I got to take a closer look. Something is different this time. And I'm not sure it bodes well." "But who are they, though?" Dern inquired. "Why are they looking for us?" "Don't know everything yet," the innkeeper responded. "They call themselves the Order of Light. Stupid choice to me. That name has probably been used to name something or other several times over throughout the years, but people love it. It's spread through those poor wretched souls like squid ink. They're all convinced if they believe hard enough that a god will be born into the world again and all their troubles will go away. So that would be the meaning of the rising star." "The rebirth?" Dern asked it deductively. Apparent he already knew the answer. Hassan felt like kicking himself for not realizing it too. Perhaps the dog boy wasn't as crazy as they thought. "Like the church," Hassan blurted out. He couldn't hold it any longer, and this seemed like the perfect time. "They had that symbol above their door." Everyone turned to look, and he suddenly felt uncomfortable. "I just wish I listened to more of what they said." His voice trailed off, unsure if he should continue. It wouldn't have done you any good if you had, Borwell told him. It's all a bunch of drivel to get you to open your coin purse. I've been to a few of their sermons out of curiosity. Didn't hear anything I haven't heard from previous charlatans and frauds selling salvation. But this time they have more behind their motives than just bilking their destitute out of their meager funds. Those priests subdue the populace while the higher echelons move in to take over the government. I saw the church myself, Dern confessed as he mulled over what he just heard. But it still doesn't add up. If this Order of Light is a religious cult, what do they want with the Khan Shogal? Doesn't matter what they want, Hassan's father broke in. The only thing they will find is the taste of our blades. Borwell nodded politely at the Kara, but there was a subtle look of dismissal to it. Then he looked back to Dern to answer. They don't say. In fact, it's only one man of the order I know of who is looking for you. Those sycophants at the church are just the faithful flock, and likely oblivious. But this man, he has soldiers and has placed a bounty for the information about you. Does the mayor know anything about this? Why doesn't he do something? Dern asked dejectedly. You mean old pompous Gulford? Yeah, I think he knows. Dern was the first to put it together. Gulford? He asked suspiciously. You mean Golly, the deranged man we met in the square. Ah, so you've met our revered ex-mayor. It's probably for the best. It would be difficult to describe his condition in a way that does it justice otherwise. Dern nodded at Borwell's logic. What happened to him? Archbishop Azimir happened. Came in the night 3 days ago with those ships. Walked right into the mayor's office and closed the door. It didn't open again until morning. When it did, Mayor Gulford was in the street like he is now, and the Archbishop was handling the city's affairs until a proper replacement could be found. He's been in charge ever since. How do you know all this? The Kara demanded. Are these the rumors your patrons tell when you get them drunk? It was mean and a little awkward, but the great chief was out of his element and finding it hard to be deprived of his authority. Something about Dern heading the discussion infuriated him. Hassan felt ashamed of his father's behavior, but couldn't bring himself to speak up. Dern intervened. Borwell is the town's scribe. He works in the mayor's office. I suspect he was there when it transpired. The Kara took the news as if he'd been physically struck. What had seemed like his one hope of regaining control had just been dashed. He returned to his chair sulkily and glared at the usurpers as they continued. Quite right, Dern. Borwell returned to the conversation, flawlessly as if nothing happened. Perhaps he did it to appease the chief, but Hassan wasn't sure. It was likely Borwell thought the man and his outbursts were inconsequential. He seemed like the type. I was there that night. I saw the mayor when the door opened. He didn't just destroy Gulford's mind, he crushed his soul. He did a Dern-like pause for that to sink in, then continued, which is why you need to leave immediately. If a man like that wants you, there can be no good come of it. And he hired slavers, so he means to take prisoners, a lot of them. He intends to take us alive, then. Intriguing. It was disturbing how Dern could respond with such cold, calm logic to this news. Before they could continue, a knock at the door startled the room into silence and brought them all out of their seats. When the young girl opened the door, she faced 5 drawn swords and 7 very startled faces. She struggled to get the words out, but the weapons had her badly shaken. They quickly sheathed their swords in an effort to calm her, but it took time. She stood there, gasping to catch her breath for a moment, before trying again. She didn't get a chance before 2 dirt-covered bundles came squeezing through the door beneath her arms. They ran straight for Hassan and latched onto his legs. I'm sorry, the girl exclaimed, almost driven to tears. They said they needed to speak with the handsome one. She gave a sniffle, then pointed straight at Hassan. He blushed in return. It's fine, Isabel. Let's just see what they want, Borwell assured her soothingly. If Hassan couldn't tell by their grubby little faces, he certainly knew who they were by the smell. The orphans from the alley had somehow found them at the inn. Well, hello there, Hassan greeted kindly. What are you guys doing here? The grubby young girl motioned with her finger for him to lean down. As he did, she attempted to whisper in his ear. Bad men coming. They hurt you. She was so terrified that everybody was able to hear what she said. Then she buried her face in Hassan's leg and began to weep. The cold terror settled into his stomach at the news. He wanted to ask more, like how far away they were, but she was trembling too much, so much he doubted he could get anything. They're coming, Hassan exclaimed, but they already knew. Quickly, follow me. Isabel, go grab those bags we prepared. Borwell flew into action, calling out commands as he led them back down the hall and into the common room. As they entered, a resounding knock shook the front door. It wasn't a casual calling. The door rang with the force of the blows, and it repeated once more. Hassan and Jogad drew their blades and charged across the room. Stop! Borwell yelled, and surprisingly they did. They turned and looked at the innkeeper in confusion. The door is locked, but will only hold them for a short while. We must go while there is still time. No, the Kara responded defiantly. If these men want to face the Khan Shogal, then I welcome our meeting. I will make them regret the day they ever thought of enslaving my people. You're a brave fool, Borwell dismissed him. Each of those ships could easily hold over 100 men, and I've seen half of that patrolling the docks. Are you prepared to face down 100, maybe more? Not on my floors. Neither man knew how to respond. Then the knocking returned to a determined pounding. They were no longer requesting someone to answer. They were coming in through the door. That lock's strong wood, but it won't hold much longer. Come now, Borwell insisted once again. This time the two stubborn warriors listened. Everyone but Hassan rushed after the innkeeper as he fled into the kitchen. Hassan ran across the common room in a sprint and tore one of the fine tapestries down off the wall. He felt guilty, but it was for a good cause. As he reached the entrance, he drew the metal rod from its frame and slammed it in place to block the door. With luck, it would buy them a few minutes. He ran to the kitchen to join the others. Dern waited in the doorway, watching approvingly. Hassan barely saw the kitchen before being pulled over into the corner with the others. Everyone was gathered around the open trap door and listening to Borwell. I have a skiff down below. There is a ladder just under the edge if you reach with your feet. Just then Isabel came rushing in, carrying several bulging packages of supplies. Did you prep the valves? Borwell asked her. It's done. I even added some of that special coal you keep to the hearth to get the fire going extra hot. Clever girl, he praised. Then he ushered everyone down through the trap door. Quickly now, we don't have much time left. Hassan quickly descended the wobbly rope ladder into the darkness beneath the city. It reeked like the alley, and the air hugged his body oppressively. When he reached the bottom, he stepped out onto a long, slender boat, but was surprised to find it did not rock as if on water. Its landlocked state left everyone staring at Borwell as he descended last. Don't worry, he reassured. You're lucky a tide is coming in soon. As if summoned, a rush of waves rolled in and lifted the skiff from its sandy bed. Grab an oar if you've got one, he called. Everyone had just gotten situated when a loud crash resounded above as pursuers brought down the front door. Numerous footsteps thudded across the floor as soldiers fanned out through the building in search of their quarry. It was a tight fit to stuff all 10 of them into the slender craft, but they managed. It left them low in the water, hovering, which made it difficult to get it moving. Hassan was trying to figure out which motion to move the awkward paddle while contending with the 2 frightened dirt balls clinging to his ankles. The others were seated evenly along the 20-foot skiff in an attempt to spread out the weight. Borwell stood in the center, with a long guide pole in hand. The dim traces of light that found their way into this dark realm left everything indistinguishable beyond a few feet in either direction, but the innkeeper produced a small replica of the strange lighted jars from his pocket. With a few shakes it glowed with that soft, subtle light. It wasn't much to see by, but Borwell managed to steer them. First he brought them to the foundation of the stone fireplace just below the common room. It seemed an odd destination, but he appeared to have a purpose. Back in the good old days, I used to steam scuttlers for big feasts. Made a nifty contraption so I could do it fast. Needless to say, I learned a few painful lessons in the process. Borwell pulled the boat up to the column. He lashed the lighted jar into a rung on the side of the boat. The light only lessened the darkness enough to make out each other's faces, but it was bright enough to reveal the assembly of pipes and valves protruding from the column. You see, my heat system draws water up from below, from down here, and pumps it into a boiler chamber upstairs in the fireplace. Borwell turned the round handles repeatedly. Turn it just the right amount, and the chamber fills with hot water, and steam that forces its way along the pipes throughout the inn. Heat the fire too much, and turn the valve a little too far, and all that water turns to searing steam. If you're cooking scuttlers, a nice pressurized steam is marvelous, but my heat system isn't built for that kind of pressure. He said the next part in between grunts as he turned one last stubborn valve. The heat and pressure builds, and there was a series of loud pops, followed by a shrill whistling hiss. Hassan was about to ask, but the answer came in the blood-curdling screams of men from above that followed. Learn that lesson the hard way, Borwell muttered. I do believe I've just created the world's biggest scuttler pot. Pretty sure it steams just as well through armor as it does through shells. He chuckled at his own cleverness. It was the only sound to accompany the waves rolling in, as the screams were already subsiding. Then he noticed the sickly look on the passengers' faces. Don't worry, the waters were much cleaner back then. Those scuttlers were just fine to eat. Borwell pulled them away from the deadly device and continued to chuckle as he steered them through the darkness. His passengers remained locked in stunned silence. After several minutes, Borwell allowed the boat to drift to a halt. He looked at each of his passengers one by one. We don't dare take this boat on open water. They'll see us for sure. With this much weight, chances are we'd capsize anyway. He stopped to consider the options for a moment. The only other way is if I can get you beneath the alley that leads to the ladders, and you climb up through one of the trap doors. You may still have to fight your way out, but it's better than battling your way through the whole city. We can't, Hassan objected. They're corroded shut. I noticed it on the way in. That isn't good. The closest I can get you is the square, then. Do you think you'll be able to fight your way out from there? We have no other choice, Dern answered. It seems you get your wish, Kara, We fight. Be ready. What about the kids? Hasan asked. It was growing hard to ignore those sad, desperate faces staring up at him. There's no way we can take them with us. If anyone saw them enter the inn before the guards arrive, they'll likely be hunted, Borwell added. What about you, Borwell? What will you do? Hasan asked. They will be looking for you, especially after... He couldn't finish the statement. Just thinking about the fate of those soldiers turned his stomach. I expected as much. That's why I told Isabel to grab our bags. When I heard you were in the city, I suspected something like this might happen and prepared. We'll hide down here for a night or two, then sail down the coast a ways and catch a ship. I could use a drier climate anyway. I'll just miss all my books. You know very well where you can get copies of all of them, and you'll have earned every single one, Dern said in an attempt to comfort him. It was just another mystery about the old man for Hasan to chew on. For now, Hasan's biggest problem was the orphans. He felt responsible for them and could only think of one option to keep them safe. The plan depended entirely upon another, so he withdrew a large coin from his pouch. It was a gift from his father for his 16th birthday and was more than enough for its intended goal of buying a stallion. But Hasan had a lewa and would never think of getting another horse. This money could be put to a more noble cause if only it would be accepted. Borwell, I would like to ask a great favor from you, Hasan announced. If it wasn't for me, these children would never be in this trouble. I must make sure they're safe. He tossed the coin to the innkeeper and watched anxiously as Borwell inspected it. That should pay a large part of their way for a little while, at least. Could you please take care of them for me? What are their names, lad? Borwell asked. Well, Hasan muttered, looking down at the two runts at his feet. Beth, the little girl muttered cautiously, and he's Albie. Well, Beth and Albie, you're welcome to join me on this adventure. Who knows, if I decided to open another inn, a few extra hands could be useful. He chuckled. It's unspoken humor, then braced the pole and pushed off. We need to hurry. The less time they have to prepare, the less you'll have to fight. They floated through the murk in an uneasy silence. Hasan was just able to make out the forest of timbers that stood around them as they passed. It felt eerie as if they were gliding through the underworld into oblivion. He thought it was possible, since death likely lay at the end of their journey. Sadly, if the worst did happen, he would leave this world having disappointed his father once again. The Kal-Ra hadn't stopped staring at his son since the exchange of the coin. He seemed hurt or angry, but the dimness made it hard to tell. Hasan could understand being upset his gift hadn't gone for its intended purpose, but couldn't he see the chance to do this kindness was a greater gift still? It was hopeless to fight it. The Kal-Ra didn't see any use in anyone other than his people. There was nothing that could change that. Dern's assessment of his father was gaining in evidence. The Kal-Ra's single-minded focus impaired his judgment. The world wasn't just withering for the Conjugal, but Kal-Ra Hasan couldn't look beyond himself to see the big picture. The old man's earlier critique was proving unnervingly accurate. Hasan didn't want to believe. He loved his father and worshipped him growing up, but he couldn't deny his father's clear failings any longer. Perhaps that was part of becoming a man. He finally realized his father was merely human too. The skiff flew through the darkness more quickly than their feet carried them in the light, and they were soon positioned beneath the central square. Borwell scanned the platform above, then pulled towards one of the massive pylons. This is as close as I can get you, Borwell announced. That trap door opens up in front of the mayor's mansion. It's risky, but it's only a short way from there to the alley. I suspect it is the last place they'll be prepared to find you. It was nice to meet you, Chief. The innkeeper nodded in respect as the Kal-Ra and his arms-master followed the two guards in ascending the column. He received only a grunt in response. And you, young Ka. It seems we should expect great things from you. Hasan looked at him befuddled. Had Dern somehow told the innkeeper about everything? Dern has taught you well, it seems, Borwell exclaimed. You have a sharp mind and a quick wit, and most importantly, you have a kind heart. He looked at the two orphans huddled in the boat. You should have food to eat and a warm place to sleep soon, Hasan called to them. Be good and listen to Borwell, and please take a bath. The children giggled at that, then huddled together, whispering, I will watch over them like they were my own, young Ka. Thank you, and thank you for everything else as well. Hasan grinned at Beth and Albie one last time, then stepped from the boat. He listened intently to Dern's farewell as he climbed. Well, Borwell, it appears I am in your debt yet again. Dern clasped the innkeeper's hand with a warm smile. If you need any help getting started, you know where to go. You'll be handsomely rewarded for your help today. I know, old man. You have very generous friends, but it's not as safe down there as you might think. Oh? Dern sounded concerned. Why is that? Heaven's Gate isn't the city it once was. It's the seat of power for this Order of Light, for one. Word is, a lot has changed, and not for the better. Dern's look of concern spurred him to continue. Not to worry. Everyone and everything is still intact, last I heard. They're just in a bit of a decline at the moment. Of course everything is fine, Dern exclaimed. There's nothing these fanatics can do to them. But it's a bit concerning. This order is larger than I assumed. If you hear anything and have the means, you know where I'm heading." He leaned down to clasp his friend one last time, then was off the boat in a single hop. "Farewell, and good luck," Warwell called as he pushed the skiff into the engulfing darkness. The Conchugal hung for a few moments in the black stillness. The sound of footfalls from above broke the silence, like drums accompanied by Hassan's heart beating through his chest. He wanted to grab for his sword before exiting into the unknown, but he needed his hands to climb. Instead, he was entering his first real fight unaware and unarmed. He'd sparred in the training yard and was quite proficient, but had never fought for his life before. He'd never faced real enemies who wished to do real harm. Hassan's anticipation built, until he thought he would pass out, but the dim, clouded light from above intruded on his panic in a glaring flash. The trap door was open. His father and Cho'Gah were through, announced by the sound of honed steel sliding from the sheath. Had they met with immediate threats, or were they simply readying themselves? The question worried Hassan as he climbed the last few feet. He took a deep breath and pulled himself into the world above. Hassan lay on the wood-planked floor of the central square for only a moment before leaping to his feet. He drew his slim 3-foot curved blade as soon as his hands were free, but he was facing the wrong direction. A crowd of terrified townsfolk cowered at his threatening pose. He spun and nearly collided with Dern as the old man stood up behind him. The rest of the party faced off with a group of men, blocking their escape to the alley. They wore fanciful shiny black armor with red inlay and bold scarlet capes. Each was armed with either spear or sword. "Halt!" the lead soldier called. "By order of the Archbishop, I detain you." "Not bloody likely," Cho'Gah laughed. To emphasize his point, he drew a second curved blade from his belt and began shearing the edges of both together, with a metal shriek as he pressed forward. A sound to their right flank stopped the charge. The rap of armored boots upon wood announced another larger contingent of troops approaching from the slave ships. It was nearly upon them. "You're outnumbered 5-1. It's time to give up, savages," the lead soldier bragged. He strolled toward them with his short sword leveled at Cho'Gah's throat. "Put your weapons down." Kara Hassan chuckled throatily. "You've never fought a Conchugal before, I take it. That sounds like even odds to me." Cho'Gah chuckled too, even as he stared at the sharp point of the soldier's blade inches from his neck. The arms master hadn't protested or even moved, and the guard must have mistakenly interpreted that as submission. "By order of the Archbishop, I take these savages into custody," the guard proclaimed, foolishly ignoring the threat. "They will be brought before His Eminence." That was as far as he got. The whistle of Cho'Gah's blade as it cleaved the air sent shivers up Hassan's spine, but no more so than the chilling screech that erupted from the soldier. The startled guard attempted to retract his weapon arm quickly enough in response to the attack, but failed. The arm returned, but the hand, still clutching the hilt, seemed to hover a moment, suspended by the momentum of the blade, then dropped quite dramatically to the ground. It all seemed to happen in slow motion for Hassan. The world felt distant and removed since entering the square. An incessant buzzing filled his mind, as if a million gnats were trying to invade. He attempted to shake it off, but nothing seemed to lessen its presence. Life-threatening events were playing out before him, but his comprehension was dulled and redirected. Something kept dragging his attention skyward. The severed hand and sword fell for minutes in Hassan's perception, but the crash as it struck the ground shattered the smothering field that ensnared him. The buzzing didn't retreat, but he pushed it to the back of his mind out of necessity. Like the bleeding cry of a battle horn, the sound set off the fierce clash. The stricken soldier screamed orders to kill as the stub of his arm fountained blood onto the decking. His frantic cries quickly grew hoarse before he dropped with a thud. The central square exploded into a riot of screams and violence. The onlookers ran in terrified herds, trampling their neighbors in an effort to flee. Soldiers charged from both directions. Hassan barely saw the sword strokes that dropped the first to reach them. His father and Cho'Gah dispatched them deftly, expending barely any effort at all. The second wave held out for several strokes and parries, but was felled much just the same. Hassan never got to watch the demise of the third, for he had his own foe to contend with. A short-armored soldier charged straight for him. Hassan's heart raced at the terrifying threat of a real battle, but his years of brutal training under Cho'Gah took hold. He swayed around the assailant's first clumsy spear strike, and let the momentum carry him to the ground, where his blade lashed out at the victim's groin. He struck where two armor plates met at the joint, but the steel bit shallow. The damage was minimal. The soldier cried out and stumbled from the unexpected wounding. His injury was minor, but the shock of it caused him to collapse. As he fell, he stabbed at Hassan, trying to pin him down with his spear, but Hassan kicked the haft aside and slashed instinctively back in response. The sword bit more deeply of the flesh this time, and a mist of warm blood spattered his face. Hassan jumped to his feet, prepared for a counter-strike attack, but the soldier's eyes were already going empty. He posed a threat no longer. Everything was screaming and the clashing of weapons and armor. Hassan's victory gave him a moment's respite to look around. Dern held an attacker at bay with a long pointy dagger. He never attacked. He waited for each lunge and slowly bled the soldier as he evaded. The guard's armor showed not a single scratch, but his blood showed profusely from the numerous joints and cinches. He made one more desperate stumbling slash at Dern's head, then collapsed in exhaustion. Sorensen right, Dern scolded, then joined Hassan. We can't stay here and fight. There are more coming. We need to break through. The Kahra was nearest the alley. Bodies lay around him in the arms master in a gory profusion. 2 of the corpses were Khan Cho'Gall. Hassan didn't see the guards fall, but it was clear they were dead. Hassan and Cho'Gall fought on, though. Their sweaty muscled frames wielded death with every mighty swing. But the onslaught kept coming. Hassan saw another wave approaching from the ships and charged into the fray to help. Even though he was nowhere equal to the 2 Khan Cho'Gall champions, he intended his blade to claim its share. Before he could join the fray, however, a resounding call brought the entire square to a sudden halt. Stop! The order crashed in the air like thunder and rolled over the heads of those present. Everyone froze. Hassan turned towards the source, an urge he'd been fighting since emerging from below. He looked skyward to a robed figure standing upon the 3rd-story balcony of the mansion nearest them. The buzzing he'd ignored until now suddenly grew more intense. It left Hassan mesmerized as the speaker descended the spiral staircase to street level. I step out onto the veranda for a peaceful respite, and am assaulted by this clamor. His voice was sharp and demanding. What is the meaning of this, Captain? It was a clever game, Hassan realized. The man feigned this surprise brilliantly. He just stumbled out onto the battle by happenstance? The claim alone made Hassan angry, for he knew for the lie it was. This man was the source of Hassan's peculiar symptoms, a fact made clearer as the severity of the buzzing increased with every step the stranger descended. He was up there watching from on high the entire time. Hassan felt him. So why did he choose to intervene now after all of this carnage? I said, explain yourself, Captain. As the newcomer's foot left the final step, a brightly colored figure scuttled to his side on all fours and nudged on his robed legs with his head. Great Lord! Great Lord! Gali called affectionately. A hand trailed down perfunctorily to scratch the man's hair like some sort of pet. Then Gali curled up contentedly by the man's feet. The captain is dead, Your Eminence. One of the soldiers pointed to the body with the amputated hand. The thrumming dominated Hassan's mind, and the stranger became all he could see. He was adorned in robes as black as night, with seams dyed the color of blood. Upon his chest was emblazoned the rising star in the eclipse. Hassan knew it could be only one person, Archbishop Aasimar. He was tall and imposing, dark eyes set deep amidst ripples of maggoty flesh. His skin was gray and sallow, as if anything living had been drained from it long ago, and it looked as if it didn't quite fit right. It bunched in ripples across his shaved head and slightly deformed its symmetry. He was human, Hassan felt certain, but he was about as far as one could get from deserving that moniker without stepping a hair's length beyond. He terrified, and Hassan was walking straight for him. Khafra Hassan closed the distance in 3 swift strides, holding his sword aloft in defense of Hassan. He didn't even sound out of breath and looked like he would be disappointed if he wasn't given a chance to be. Stand back, priest, or meet your so-called god now. He stared the archbishop down coldly. Aasimar straightened in disbelief. What in the world is going on here? He wove his words with a voice of startled wonder. Would someone please explain why I have a war zone in my city? Your Eminence? The soldier who spoke up earlier replied. I suppose I can, sir. He was clearly terrified to do so. Hassan wondered what kind of a punishment Aasimar dealt out to those who displeased him. It was obviously enough to leave a mark of fear upon his man's mind. He walked forward warily and knelt in trembling pose. The men you wanted, Your Eminence, we found them, and they fought back. So you tried to kill them? Aasimar asked astoundingly. He turned a compassionate gaze to the chieftain, but his natural guise made it horribly unsettling. Your Grace, the soldier stammered, they was kinda gonna kill us if we didn't. He flinched as he spoke, as if expecting a crushing blow at any moment. Aasimar leaned back in contemplation. His unnaturally long fingers clasped each other over his chest, the black-painted fingernails biting into the flesh of the opposite hand. He rubbed at something beneath the fabric with his thumbs almost compulsively. I must apologize for these simpletons. I simply wish to speak with the great Kahra of the Khan Cho'Gall. And I was willing to pay to find you. Apparently their love for money overrode their common sense. The words echoed Hassan's mind, not because he was listening, however. The object beneath Aasimar's robes had consumed him since coming to his attention. The buzzing in his head had grown to an unbearable prickling sensation, as if he was under some kind of assault. Was it trying to invade his thoughts? It called to him, too. It desperately wanted him to approach. He fought the urge with all his strength. The terror he felt for Aasimar helped, but try as he might, he couldn't turn his eyes away. They killed 2 of my men, Hassan replied threateningly, and I'm certain the light of heaven shall be withdrawn from their life for such a sin. There was an assuredness to his tone. Aasimar clasped the object beneath his robes, and the buzzing in Hassan's mind rose to a roar. The kneeling soldier fell forward in convulsions without warning. It was violent and extremely brief. In the end, the man lay open-mouthed, empty gaze staring into the clouds. "The power of light is supreme," the archbishop muttered, like some form of mantra. The soldiers knelt and recited the same. "There, justice has been restored," Asimir announced approvingly. "God's wrath is swift." "What do you want with us?" Hazan demanded. There was an understandable hint of fear in his eyes. It wasn't clear whether he believed the charade, but he certainly wasn't satisfied with the answers. "Well, great Kara, first and foremost, I wish to meet such a brave and strong leader as yourself. I admire the way you choose to live your lives in such hardship. Truly inspiring. But I also wish to ask a favor of you." "I doubt I would agree to anything." "Well, let's see, shall we? The people gather for a celebration soon. Your people gather for a celebration soon. The Dahara, is it?" Asimir received no confirmation, so he continued. "I feel the people of my city are overlooking a marvelous chance for business with your people, and I wish to remedy that. It's understandable you may be hesitant, however I believe I can make it a bargain for your troubles. I would like to send a shipment with you to this grand celebration. My men can set up shop and offer all kinds of goods. If you haven't noticed, we need to do something to bring in some money. Khan Shogal alone are welcome at the Dahara. We will bring no other." The words were final. "I suspected as much," Asimir shrugged disappointedly. "But perhaps a compromise? You see, none of our wagon trains are willing to travel the ladders yet. I thought your hardy people might be eager to brave the highlands for us. If you're forbidden from sharing the location of this Dahara, perhaps you could at least transport our goods to the high plains. The Stone Lords are always willing to trade after a long winter. We have contacts who can take them off your hands once you arrive. You'd be doing the people of Anhara a great service." "Our people are long gone from this place," Hazan spit. "We carry nothing." "Very well. You're free to go. The last thing I wish is for any more of you to die for my whims. May your journey be safe." He dismissed them disappointedly, then climbed the stairs back to the veranda. Hassan felt a jolt as the object of his intense focus broke away. The others were already heading for the alley. He was still staring fixedly at the archbishop and the source of the humming sound, which is why he caught the covetous look the priest gave his father. This attempt must have proved too costly, but no matter what he claimed, the archbishop still desired his prize. Hassan was certain Asimir would try again. Dern grabbed Hassan's arm and drew him along hastily. "I don't know what's wrong with you, boy, but we need to go now. That snake is already plotting something. I can smell it." They stumbled along together over bodies and dismembered limbs all the way to the alley's entrance. There wasn't a shred of resistance to enter that dank alley after witnessing what lay at their feet, and they were soon gone from the square. They fled through the stench and the muck and didn't notice one bit of it. When they reached the exit, they flew down the stairs, 3 at a time, in a rush to reach the horses, but they came to a stunned halt when the picket line came into view. The scene was a rival to what Hassan had left back in the square. Blood was splattered everywhere, and chunks of gore decorated the ground. One armored body lay crumpled at the base of the nearby tree. A red splatter 10 feet up the trunk revealed the source with which his head collided with it. There were 2 unrecognizable masses of trampled goo closer to the tie-off where they left the horses. Bits of bone and armor poked through the remains where something had been stomped into the ground. "Alewa?" Hassan called nervously, fearing the worst. Her excited whinny called back as she trotted out of the forest with the other horses in tow. All their tether lines were chewed through and held in her blood-stained teeth. Brahma didn't look thrilled with being led around like this, but there was excitement in his eyes. By the look of his coat, he was part of the massacre and was likely rather pleased with himself. "I told you that blasted horse is the devil," Cho'Gath chuckled. "Just glad she's on our side." They wasted no time. In a rush they were saddled and spurring their vicious killers down the cobblestone road from Anhara. Their mounts galloped up the winding ramps and out onto the flat, rugged highlands beyond. They left all the violence and bloodshed behind. But Hassan could feel it, following. Perhaps it was just in his mind, like that strange buzzing, but either way he knew their troubles were far from over.